We've got 2 more minutes and then we will start the meeting. We always start on Humboldt time. We try to go a few minutes later. And people will just, Jim and Tuesday, people will just kind of keep coming in as we chat and leave too, but we kind of like to keep it that way. This meeting will be recorded. If anybody says anything on this call that they don't feel comfortable with, reach out to me and I can edit it before I put it on YouTube. This is a totally safe space. We don't want to put anybody at risk. We just want to create an environment to learn and share. So just let me know if you're like, oh, Lele, that wasn't cool. And I'm gonna start because we've got some new folks and we've got more folks coming in, but I think most of the new folks are already on. So I'm Lele, is what everybody calls me, or Lelania. I am a second generation cannabis community leader. I'm a patient. I've been trimming this plant since I was 9. I've been growing it for a little bit, not as long. And I come from the community in Northern California in the Emerald Triangle that has really curated it. And so I lead this group. I'm the founder of Humboldt Grace, which is the nonprofit mission through the Ink people. And we've been doing a research project for the past few years around the skunk one, which was graciously donated to us through Martel Yip of Sensational Solutions. And we were able to DNA test that skunk one through medicinal genomics and cross-reference it to the original skunk one from David Watson to show that it was from that lineage. You can find out more about the process that this skunk has gone through on our website page. We're now at the final stages of that project, and we're fundraising to put together the white paper that'll share all the data that the skunk showed us being grown in different microclimates in the Emerald Triangle and through different farmers. And why we put that skunk through all that process was looking for pathways to protect, preserve, authenticate, and give value not only to the plant itself, but to the culture and the people that have spent so many decades in curating the plant. Through that process, we've discovered that DNA testing stands up in a court of law to prove that this is your plant. We have developed a we've, in partnership with a company called Cannabis, helped develop a very unique security system that's a blockchain hashtag system to help protect your cultivar before you send it out to a lab, because we know a lot of people are worried about that. And then through the grow off, we were able to put this particular cut of the skunk one out to multiple farms in different regions throughout the Emerald Triangle and get data back from that. Then we were able to put it out to consumers directly through Mocha Humboldt and get consumer feedback. And so now what we're doing is we're putting all that information together to share with the state, the public, whoever would like to see it, what the plant told us and what we learned through this experiment. One of the updates for the group is that I had a really great conversation with Caleb Chen and Daniel Hendricks from Hendricks Nursery. And they pointed out to me that kind of my personal passion and mission around this has kind of always been accountability, because I believe when you take accountability, then the good people shine through, like the truth shines through. And that really what we created was an ethical pathway to deal with the plant. And so we've decided to put out, like we did with the consumer survey, and I did with the Human Rights Commission, the Cannabis Human Rights Survey, put out a third survey, the Cannabis Ethics Survey, and distribute it throughout our community and to whoever else wishes to share it out there. We'll get it online so everybody can share it and see if through this white paper we can't use the seed to help teach the rest of this crazy, wacky legal world happening. What are those core values that allowed us to this plant to carry through the people for not just the past decades, but like really centuries. It's been in the people's hands. And in this group, I know we really believe those core values are love and grace, which go out everywhere. But to really define ethics, you need to go to the community that's harbored this culture. And so we want to survey our community. I think the whole episode at Glass House and so many other things going on, it's a really great time for that conversation. And this white paper helps use science in the plant to show why it's important. So that's where we're at. We need to raise $5,000 to get this white paper completely done and out there properly, because I am not college educated in these things, and we would like to bring Mitchell Colbert in, who ran the Ethica Data Alliance and helped with our first white paper and very much understands the process that we're working with. And if everybody on our call list or on this email list that shows up to these meetings gave $20, it'd be taken care of. Oh, and there's Mitchell. All right, so any questions about the project specifically, about Humboldt Grace and what we're doing before we go into our presentation? And we will also have discussions for Tuesday and Jim after their presentation, and then we can discuss amongst ourselves. It's what we call the sesh, where we update each other. We have people from all over the state and actually the US. Sometimes we have people from all over the world on this call, so it's always nice to hear what's going on in everybody's neck of the woods. And we have advocates, scientists, all sorts of different kinds of people. So that's the agenda for today. Any questions or on the project itself on what I just discussed before we go into our guests? Chandra?
Yes, I'd just like to add that we are not the very first plant people to have to face this. Homeopaths as well as herbalists faced legal challenges as well as not knowing what they had well into the 1950s because of the illegality of herbal as well as homeopathic knowledge in this country. We're just starting a little bit later, trying to regain our sanity and our sense of purpose as a people. So I just want to say that every other bunch of alternative healing people went through the stages we're going through right now, and it's really great to be working on trying to rectify history.
Thank you, Chandra. All right, anyone else? Okay, well, thank you, everyone. We are recording this call, and it'll go up on YouTube in a couple days. It just depends on my bandwidth. But I'm really excited. What was it? A couple months ago, I think, Patty came to me and was given this amazing opportunity to speak on this project to a group of students at Oregon State University. And it was in Jim or Tuesday, you can correct me on this. I believe it was a class of PhD students, and it was the plant intellectual property class. And it was for me, it was incredible to get to speak to a group like that coming from this experience and this conversation. And afterwards, I asked Tuesday and Jim if they would come and talk to all of us and share well, we got someone else. Share some of their wisdom and be available for all of you to ask questions. So Jim is the professor in the class, and Tuesday is one of the students. She's also a big advocate for the plant. She does a lot of social equity work out of San Diego. Jim's background, from what I gleaned, from what I could glean, is, and I found really interesting, is it seems like, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, you've done a lot of work in identifying unique traits in plants.
Unique niches for growing plants and that sort of thing, with a focus on vegetables for the most part.
Which I found really synergistic to what can the kind of minds and thought process that cannabis needs around it right now. And so I just thought, wow, how wonderful. So I'd like to give the floor to you. Everyone, please write down any questions you have. Do you want them to wait until the oh, sorry, I think no, that's not someone talking to me. Do you want people to wait to the end to ask questions, or would you like them to ask questions as you go along and raise their hand?
I think what we both have a couple of presentations, so it might be good to step through those and then we go to questions.
Okay, well, I will put this on speaker view and let you two take over.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lily. That quite the introduction here. Um, I think, it was Tuesday who really made the connection and wanted to bring you in to talk about, in particular, about the blockchain uh, technology that you were using, and because we're interested in novel forms of intellectual property protection. But so it was very interesting, and the class was very interested in this particular approach and how it might be used more widely. Um, that said, I think what I see as our goal today is just kind of to walk through some of the forms of intellectual property protection, which I'll do, and and then just talk a little bit about how these apply to cannabis, and then open it up for questions. And let me see if I can share my slides here. And okay, you're seeing
We see you.
a title slide? Okay,
Yes.
okay, great. Um, so yeah, I was gonna walk through my part and then turn it over to Tuesday. So talk about different types of intellectual property, why private companies are preferring utility patents. This seems to be the route that many private entities are going. How to determine if a cultivar is patented? This is often a question I get, and it's not the easiest one to answer. Give you some idea of resources that are available and ways to challenge patents. If you see one that is coming down the pike that might claim some aspect of your own work or material, then um, there are ways to challenge that. And the other thing is, I would say that I'm a plant breeder. I'm not a patent attorney. So if you, what I'm not giving you legal advice. And if you have questions, legal questions, then you need to talk to someone who's licensed for that. So there are basically three forms that we use here in the U.S. For intellectual property protection of plants. The first one listed on this slide is plant patents. This was implemented in about 1930 to protect uh, only asexually propagated plants, excluding the edible tubers and things like that. It's administered by U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. In 1970, the Plant Variety Protection Act came into effect, and this was developed to provide protection for sexually propagated plants or seed propagated plants. It was updated further in 1994 to match what's called UPOV, which are kind of the global plant breeders' rights. And most recently, asexually propagated plants have been added to its purview as well. And this may have come about because of the legalization of hemp. That's kind of my understanding, is that was the driver for this allowing the asexual propagation portion of it. And then finally, utility patents. Utility patents have been around since 1790, but it was only in 1985 that they were out that through a court case and an internal review that it was decided that plants can be the subject of utility patents. And this was challenged in court in 2001, and then affirmed by the Supreme Court that this is indeed the case. And so now you see so many utility patents on not only techniques and various types of germplasm, but also they're being very widely used to protect individual cultivars over time. And this slide here, there's a lot on this slide, but this is really kind of the meat of the whole topic area on intellectual property protection, and I'll go through it line by line here. Listed across the top are 4 categories. I didn't mention licenses earlier, but licenses are often used in conjunction with these other forms of intellectual property protection. Licenses by themselves are not very strong, but a lot of companies have used them as a kind of an add-on when they're patenting something. So first, all is what's called breeder's exemption, and most utility patents are written so that you can't breed with the material. You can't use it further to make crosses, to even do research with the material. There's an exemption in PVP that allows you to use other material to make crosses and create a new variety. This is a major difference between the two. Plant patents, this has never really been addressed, but these are asexually propagated, and most people have understood that something can be used to make a cross and create a new variety from an asexually propagated crop. Now that's changing. There are some private companies that are excluding that through licenses in particular. Essentially derived is whether the thing you derive from the original variety, how similar is it to the original? Quite often with things covered by plant patents, you may find a sport. It may be a dwarf plant that came out of a full-size plant. And with a plant patent, if it's asexually propagated, you can patent that. There's no restrictions on essentially derived with utility patents, but they're not allowed with PVP. So this means that you can't take something, an existing variety, and backcross a single trait into it and then get a PVP on it. That would not be allowed. There's a farmer's exemption as well for saving seed under PVP, and that's for personal use. You can't save seed then and use that for commercial production. There's no such exemption under utility patents or plant patents or licenses. The scopes vary quite a bit between these different forms. So PVP applies only to individual cultivars. It's 1 cultivar per PVP application. Same with plant patents, but utility patents can be quite broad. You can patent technologies, you can patent methodologies. I know there's one cannabis patent that is very broad in its claims, so it covers many different, potentially many different cultivars. The requirements for obtaining a patent or a PVP are different. With PVP, you have to demonstrate that a variety is distinct, that it is uniform, and that it is stable. So that makes it hard to get a PVP for an open pollinated variety because of the variability you might have in it. Utility patent requires that it be novel, it be useful, non-obvious, and there is no prior art. Someone hasn't done this before. And those can be kind of confusing and difficult to kind of navigate. Asexually, plant patents, they have to be asexually reproduced, and you have to show that they're distinct and new. The legal authorities are under PVP. It's the PVP Act administered by the USDA Agriculture Marketing Service, U.S. Patent and Trademark Office for utility patents and plant patents. And licenses are basically contract law. They're very flexible, can be written in many different ways. The time limit of protection. Now these are what are called limited monopolies. It gives you a monopoly on this material for a certain period of time. 20 years for PVP with some exceptions, and 20 years for utility patents and plant patents. Now there is some variation in this, in that with a PVP, the terms, that 20 years starts when you receive the certificate. So maybe you're 2 years in getting that certificate, but then your 20-year period starts. Now with a utility patent, it starts when you file for that patent. So you actually get fewer years generally for a utility patent than a PVP. The expense. PVP is something that I can write and submit. The utility patent usually involves a lawyer. You may be talking about tens of thousands of dollars of fees there. Plant patents are generally very cheap, easy to write, and licenses generally are going to involve a lawyer as well. Just as a ballpark on a PVP, they're running somewhere between $7,000, $8,000 to file, or to receive one for that. Yeah, and just reiterating that the major differences between PVP and utility patents are the breeder's exemption, the farmer's exemption, and then the difference in essentially derived. The private sector really likes utility patents because they're very strong. They can let them control access to this germplasm, where they regard PVP as weak. This breeder's exemption, farmer's exemption to them is weak. They're coming from a perspective of maybe having spent years and years putting together this unique genetic package, and they really don't want someone taking that and putting it into their material in just a few years. It also allows people to get very broad patents. There, for example, is a patent in broccoli on heat tolerance, which claims is very broad in its claims, so that many varieties fall under that particular patent. And that's why the company did it, is they didn't want to file just one patent per variety. They wanted to be able to patent the whole ball of wax. From a public perspective, I have some problems with utility patents, and they're preventing access to germplasm. They may slow innovation. Companies tend to be sitting on their germplasm silos and not really exchanging material. You don't want to talk about your material before you apply for a patent, so it kind of stifles communication. People may not engage in research in certain areas because of the patents that are present. And broad patents can certainly lock up a particular area. And they've also created some barriers to international exchange that we really don't have time to go into, but it's a whole nother can of worms. Some things about utility patents. There was a change in patent law in 2013, which in my opinion was good. We went from a first to invent to first to file system, where it's whoever files that patent it gets the patent. There's some re-examination procedures. The ex parte re-examination is basically an interior re-examination by USPTO of a patent when there's enough information that they think maybe they made a mistake in issuing the patent in the first place. There's also an inter partes re-examination, which allows one company or one entity to challenge another. This is a very expensive, time-consuming process, and generally requires a lot of lawyers and a lot of money. There's also a third-party pre-issuance submissions by third parties. This is new and something very nice when a patent publishes before it is actually granted. And so during that period after it's published, there's a 6-month window when you can file a pre-issuance submission, which would be prior art. You can bring prior art to the attention of the patent examiner, and it may influence whether they grant a patent or whether they narrow the claims of a patent. And another thing that happened is it expanded the definition of prior art. So it's anything published anywhere around the world, to include anything on the net, any of the gray literature, not just research papers and that sort of thing. So those are some things that are part of the utility patent system now. Now, just kind of walk through how you might go about determining whether something has a patent on it, or PVP. First of all, is it an heirloom? If so, then it's likely that there is no intellectual property protection. If it's in the National Plant Germplasm System, I know there are some hemp varieties that are in the germplasm system now. Generally, you can get access to this germplasm. You can ask for it. If you're a bona fide researcher, you can ask for it, and it will come generally sent to you for free. But sometimes, particularly material that comes from international sources, may have what's called a standard material transfer agreement with it. This is part of an international treaty that has been developed for exchanging germplasm internationally. If it's an F1 hybrid, it may not have any formal IP other than just being a trade secret. As long as with an F1 hybrid, as long as you keep the inbreds secret, then nobody else can reproduce it. But you could use an F1 hybrid as a parent in a cross, or you can, some people do hybridize it, where they will self-pollinate it and extract lines out of it. Generally check catalogs. Sometimes these are more related to if a vegetable situation or a conventional crop situation. They may not typically apply to cannabis, but if there are catalogs, sometimes the intellectual property protection is listed there. Sometimes on a seed packet, if you're buying this commercially, you can search the plant variety protection database. There are a couple of links here for new certificates and scanned certificates. U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has a public patent search where you can search for cannabis patents. I think Tuesday's going to say more about that. One of the problems is, though, with utility patents is often they're granted on, say, an experimental number and not a name. So it can be difficult to associate the name of something that's out there commercially with something in a utility patent. When all else fails, you can call the breeder or call the seed company and just ask about particular material. Recently, there was basically under the Biden administration, there was this initiative to have more communication between USPTO and PVP offices, and a very useful site that was developed is Seed Liaison News. I put the link up here. If you want to learn more about how to read a patent, they have a very helpful thing on their website. They also have links to the third-party pre-issuance and information on how to step through the process. Unfortunately, under the recent federal administration, their activities have been suspended. They used to send out a list every week of all the patents that published in the prior week that were on plants. And that was a very useful way to find out what was coming down the pipeline. this is just a list of some of the useful links. I've sent this presentation to Lele, and she can post it and make it available to you so you can use these to, if you're interested in searching for patents or any of these other things we've talked about. And I'll just conclude with just a quick my thoughts on cannabis, which I don't know a lot about the details of, but in general, and I think we're kind of in a Wild West in terms of intellectual property with cannabis. And when something new comes along like this with U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, the patent examiners don't really know what they're looking at. They don't have the knowledge. And so they often make mistakes in granting very broad patents, like this one I mentioned earlier. Patent attorneys generally try to seek very broad claims on patents that they're prosecuting, and they, if the patent examiner doesn't know better, then these broad claims could be made. A patent examiner really needs access to prior art. And with cannabis, a lot of the prior art is very informal. We don't have the research papers for the most part and things like this. So it really is difficult for a patent examiner to find prior art. And so I think it's very important for people, if they think a patent should be challenged, to provide this prior art to the patent examiner. Or the other way to get it into the hands of the patent examiner is to bring this prior art to the attention of the patent attorneys for that patent. This is not, this isn't something that this is something that people will do. It's not something that is really sanctioned, but it's one way to get this information included in the record when the patent's being prosecuted. Another area are germplasm deposits. Germplasm deposits are not required for plant patents. For PVP, if it's seed propagated, yes, there has to be a seed deposit in the USDA National Plant Germplasm System. These are held in the germplasm system for the 20 years of the patent, and only the inventor can access that material. And expires, then that material becomes public and anybody can access that seed. Now, when the asexually propagated material was added to PVP, they were talking about requiring a voucher specimen process that looked like it was going to be very expensive, but basically what they've said now is that whoever files the PVP, the inventor, has to maintain that material and make it available if so requested. For utility patents, there are generally private entities that house the collection, whether that's seed or asexually propagated material, like the American Type Culture Collection in the US or NCBI, which is based in Scotland. These are generally very expensive. It costs a lot to put the material in there. It costs a lot to get the material out of there. I recently requested a couple of tomato lines out of NCBI, and it cost me over $2,000 to obtain that germplasm. And then the last area is litigation. I don't think there's been much litigation in the cannabis area, but certainly at the federal level, and particularly with high THC forms, there's some question about whether you want to be, during discovery, making admissions of handling this material at the federal level, potentially could be prosecuted. And then, if you're in a court case where physical evidence is required, again, at the federal level, that's kind of a sticky situation, I think. So I'm going to stop there and stop my share. I don't know if anybody, I guess, has a burning question, we can answer that now, or we can go directly to Tuesday presentation.
Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask Jim before we hear what Tuesday has to say, breaking it down more around cannabis? I have a question, if no one else does. And, one of the big hurdles is the whole patent conversation within itself, right? Like, not everything can be patented, and there's a lot of subtle diversities in this plant. I'm curious in the other plant world and other in specialized plants. Um, do you use the patent for protection in like licensing agreements, or are there other ways that those sort of processes that can, or are there other things like there is now, and other people in this group can speak to this more than I can, a court case that was settled because of the DNA testing. Like the breeder tested it, then he went to business with it, and the contract was violated. And so they were able to take the plant that was in the facility of the company versus the original DNA test and show that this was what the contract was built around. Um, can you kind of like describe a little bit of what that looks like in the regular plant world? Because we're kind of like a lot of these things we're trying to make happen with no framework, and so I'm comparing kind of helps.
Mm-hmm. So I'll just tell you about what we're doing here at OSU in terms of when I release a vegetable cultivar, we generally apply for plant variety protection and then license it to a vegetable seed company. And so there's the PVP part of it, and then there will generally be a license written up that describes how that material goes out and the royalties that come back to the program to support my breeding efforts and so forth. We don't generally try to fingerprint the varieties with through genomics or anything like that initially. I think that's often used later on when there's a potential, when there's a dispute and you want to determine whether something is similar or identical to something you have PVP'd or patented. So that generally comes after the process.
And so what evidence then is used, just the PVP itself, that you had that in your possession prior, like you to validate your prior art? What
Mhm.
evidence is used to validate the prior art?
Yes, so when you file a PVP, you have to describe the plant in great detail. I haven't seen the form for hemp, but it probably has all these arcane characteristics that you need to measure and list on there. And what you want to do, what the patent or the PVP examiner wants you to do is to compare your material to things that are existing, usually some cultivar, Czech cultivar, and then you describe how it's different from that other cultivar. And so it's really, what you're doing is you're documenting in detail the characteristics of that particular variety and then how it differs from other existing varieties, what makes it unique. And so that's the basis that people are using. It's primarily morphological. Sometimes it is chemical traits and uh, things like that, and which I think would be very applicable to cannabis.
Thank you, Jim. Tuesday, thank you for taking time out of your summer.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here today. I want to make sure that my PowerPoint is coming up properly. So can you see the PowerPoint? Are you seeing my speaker notes?
Nope,
No,
it's good.
Okay, that's great.
are seeing your search bar.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, if
That's
it's not too
okay.
much of an issue, I'll just leave that.
Nah.
Okay, sounds good. Um, yeah, so as Lele mentioned, I was working with Patty in San Diego, and then began my graduate work and taking this plant and patents class with Jim. And I remembered Patty had mentioned something about that, so I got into conversation with her, and she connected me with you, and both of you guys came to speak to my class. So A big thank you for that. That was really enriching for us, and I'm really excited for this opportunity to speak with you as well. A little bit about me. My name is Tuesday Danielle Simenc. I'm now a second year PhD student at Oregon State University, and I was a vice president of research for the Council of Equity Advocacy in San Diego, which is a cannabis equity group. I hold a degree in plant biology with a minor in anthropology. And my two mentors that I'm learning to be a doctor from are these amazing academics, Stephen Belush, who was the hemp breeder for Arcadia Biosciences and is now doing hemp breeding at Oregon State University, and Dr. Kelly Vining, who is a geneticist and bioinformatician who published the first hemp pangenome. And the Pangenome Project is really important, but we'll talk about that a little more towards the end as we're looking towards the future of cannabis. And something that Jim mentioned that I too will mention because it's very, very important is that I'm not a lawyer. So none of this is going to be legal advice. However, there is a lot of pro bono work for cannabis, especially. And I would bet good money that Lele or other community leaders can put you in touch with someone who can give you more specific advice. Let's get into it. I'm going to talk about patenting cannabis, and I'll define this as any legal protections of the cannabis plant or legal protections of the plant's derivatives. It's relevant to share that a lot of the information that I have to share with you today is not from scientific or academic research articles. And this is because cannabis is a new frontier due to the issues with legalization, funding towards medicinal cannabis research. So a lot of the information I'm going to share with you is coming from newspaper articles and podcasts. There are some academic articles, but they are also taking from primary resources like those newspapers and interviews. So numbers that I'm sharing with you might not be accurate to a T. I encourage you all to ask questions and poke holes and do your own research because we're kind of just figuring this out as it's coming out. Yes, so some patterns that I have found in searching for cannabis patents. I first looked at the US Patent and Trademark Office. A lot of the patents I found fall under these three categories, which are going to be methods for medicine extractions, products made with cannabis, topicals and edibles, and just different things like that. And then cannabis delivery systems. So any molecule that we can pair with the cannabis medicine that will help your body uptake it better, more efficiently. And those are very important when looking towards medicine. For current patents, I found 17 varieties of hemp, and hemp is going to be your non-medicinal varieties, and these are listed mostly in plant variety protections. However, I looked at the US Patent and Trademark Office as well, and shout out to Jim for helping me with this search. But we found um, more than 30 varieties of medicinal cannabis that have been patented. Um, to be honest, in that group, we found 83 hits with the search query that we put in, but going through those, a lot of them were not patents for a plant specifically. Um, Yes. So those 30 varieties of medicinal cannabis mostly are coming from your state of California. California has always been the leader in this industry, Colorado and Washington. And then I saw a few from Denmark as well. Themes and concerns within cannabis patenting, as Jim mentioned several times, and I'll mention again because it's really very it's catastrophic how broad the patent claims can be. The wide scope of the patent can create monopolies, and sometimes companies will patent something and then sit on it and not do anything with it, essentially blocking out everyone else from moving forward with the technology. Lack of distinctness within the species. This is along with broad patents. The very first medicinal cannabis patent is for Ecuadorian sativa. And this patent was based on terpene levels and oil ratios within the plant. And we know that taking seed from the same population and maybe growing them in two different areas and having those plants experience different environmental factors can greatly change the chemotype. So I'm not sure if terpene and oil and chemical ratios are going to be the best way to, um, to check mark your novel phenotypes from the cannabis. Maybe there's something else we could look at. And there's also lack of federal backing. It might be difficult to find a lawyer who's going to stand behind you if they believe that cannabis use is immoral or, in their jurisdiction, it's illegal, so they don't want to touch it. And once you find a lawyer, then you have to find a judge who's going to who's going to help you litigate if you need to do that. So that's a huge rift. And then biggest issue, in my opinion, is going to be the trust between farmers and corporations. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the Open Cannabis Project. Oregon's Open Cannabis Project was an organization that held a lot of cannabis information from farmers. They asked all these farmers in good faith to send them their information. And at the end of the day, the Open Cannabis Project was associated with a private bioscience group. And that private bioscience group swooped in and took all the data and didn't ask for permission and didn't recognize the original people who put it in. So I mean, it hurts my feelings. It's horrible. And I definitely get why this type of industry may not want to collaborate, especially with issues like this. And I see this happening also with AI projects, ChatGPT or different AI industries have scraped the internet from their data and don't acknowledge the authors, don't recognize, don't bring money back to who actually brought the data in the first place. It's pretty messed up. So yes, trust between farmers and corporations for sure. So why should I patent my plant? If I have a great cannabis plant, why should I patent it? You can help, if your cannabis plant has a patent, you'll deter theft. So I would want to say you want to prevent theft, but as we were discussing, a lot of legal issues and it's difficult to litigate. So you can't always prevent the theft, especially if you know that you won't be able to pursue litigation, but you can definitely deter it because the threat of litigation can be enough. You can ensure that you can use your property. So if I have this wonderful cannabis plant and it somehow gets out and someone else patent it, even though it was mine in the first place, now that the other person is holding the patent, I can no longer use that plant in my breeding programs. So patenting your plant will make sure that everyone knows that it came from you and you can always use your property. Securing investments and funding and grants. If your cannabis plant is patented, that signals to everybody that you have something worth protecting and they might want to jump in and get in on that. And finally, just having a paper trail for this evolving federal landscape. Because we don't know what the future holds, it will be good to have this patent that the government recognizes your property. Why not patent your plant? Because your information will be made public. If I have a cannabis plant that's great breeding stock and I don't want anyone to know about it, if I go ahead and patent, your information is going to be made public. As we said before, it's difficult to enforce the patent. And we can talk about some alternatives to patenting. Material transfer agreements. It's just going to be a contract between you and the farm that is maybe growing out your seeds. Transfer or trademarks, trade secrets, and non-disclosure agreements. All of these are contracts that hold whoever is going to be touching your product is going to hold them accountable. And finally, ethics. We might not want to patent due to ethics, we might want to keep our seed open source. Or maybe we have this cannabis plant and its parents have belonged to somebody else. So maybe I don't feel exactly that this is totally mine, it's everyone's. And finally, patenting cannabis can also move the cannabis industry more towards market and capitalism and less from the community where it started. These are some considerations. Is your plant worth protecting? Short answer is yes, because if you're a plant breeder and you're entertaining this question at all, you know you have something valuable. And some ways to measure whether or not your plant is worth protecting, if it's a good breeding stock, if you're excited about the products or the medicine, if it's superior in some way, maybe it's really tall, so you get really great fibers from it. This is where documentation is going to play a role. You don't necessarily need to patent your plant legally through the USPTO or USDA. Other methods are entirely sufficient. Again, especially if you know you're not going to be able to litigate. I have a list here. How do I start? The green means that these are going to be free and the easiest ways to protect your plant. Yellow is going to be a little more legwork and maybe a little more funding that you need. And then red is going to be a little more cost prohibitive. So first of all, and I encourage this to anybody who is growing plants, document everything. Document, document, document. Write the dates. If you can get a timestamp in some way, that would be great. I really enjoy emailing things to myself because the email is kind of static and it's just going to live in your inbox. It's going to have a timestamp and you can always reply to yourself so you can continue growing your document that way. You should have your details and description of the plant. I would suggest going to the USPTO website and seeing what the federal government is asking in order to patent a plant and just modeling your notes after that. Because in the future, if you decide you do want to patent, you're going to have all the details that you need already in one place. It is important to note that once your material is made public, you only have 1 year to decide to file and legally protect it. If that year eclipses, you no longer have the right to come in and pursue a patent on your plant. So that's something to consider in whether or not you want to write something down online, if you have a blog, different things like that. I would say try to keep this important materials to yourself. Material transfer agreement is also easy if you're working with one company and you need to transfer your product, your seed, your plant to another company for any reason. Make sure you have a contract between you two that other company is not going to be using your plants for anything else except for what you've already outlined. Another really great thing to do is get an herbarium sample in, whether that is I think Humboldt, it's not called Humboldt State anymore. Cal Poly Humboldt probably has a great herbarium that they may want to get more samples. That would be a good resource to reach out to them. I know that there's cannabis herbarium specifically. I found a few online, so worth a Google search. Trademarking is also very good. Trademarking is it is and isn't free. You can always slap a trademark onto your product for free, but in order to register your trademark with the state or the country, you do need to pay a little bit of a fee. This one I've marked it as the most important because it transcends scheduling issues. Your trademark is always going to be your trademark no matter what is happening in the federal realm. Something else you could do is also the geographical indication. This would be kind of like in the box of raisins, it says California raisins or Florida oranges, something like that. Maybe the Humboldt group can get together and do a special like Humboldt grown cannabis, and only people within your realm can use that sticker. That might be a great option as well. Seed bank, you can send material into a seed bank, but as Jim said, this can be cost prohibitive for putting your seed in and taking it out, and then the plant variety plant variety protection, which we have talked about in length during Jim's presentation. The Humboldt Grace Legacy Project is also a great resource, so look for your community leaders for that for more information. Coming soon, genetic engineering. I do need to say that there are a lot of strong opinions about GMOs and genetic engineering and other gene-related technologies. So it's kind of a shaky, conversation to have. But I'm just here to share with you what is happening because these things are happening. People are doing them already. So I think it's important to know what's going on. At Oregon State University, we have the hemp pangenome. And I promised that I would talk about this. The pangenome is basically these researchers have put together and looked at 144 different hemp genomes representing like a wide selection of different cannabis. You have drug type cannabis, you have fiber type, you have cannabis from all corners of the world. We have a really good, 144 plants that we think is a good example of the diversity that's out there. And we have aligned the genomes so that the sections line up, I guess. And what we're doing with this is taking different groups of cannabis and looking at their genomes and seeing what's different with this group that the other groups don't have. What is making this group have such good fiber or such good seed or such good medicine? And we find unique things in those groups. And this will be very helpful in hemp breeding because if I'm looking for a fiber type hemp, and I don't have any of the genome data, I have to grow out the hemp all the way to the end and then assess the fiber quality and pick which ones I want to use as the parents for the next generation. With the pangenome, once we find the unique spots within the fiber genome that will make the plant have good fiber, all I have to do is grow out a bunch of seedlings and genotype the seedlings and figure out which ones have that unique spot in them that indicate that it's going to have good fiber. And then I can throw all the rest of them away and focus on the few that do have the fiber molecular marker or pretty much anything you can think of, we should be able to find within the pangenome. And we're also within the Hemp Innovation Center, we're also comparing cannabis to hops. Cannabis and hops are very closely related, and humans love hops because we love beer. So there has been a lot of work done on hops, and we think this can translate well into cannabis so that we can determine terpene and oil and different qualities that we would like. Other technologies that's happening, this list is not exhaustive. We've got CRISPR gene editing, precise gene editing. We can do ploidy manipulation. This will be like seedless fruits in the grocery store are usually triploids. So it goes to assume that we can also make cannabis a triploid, and then we don't have to worry about seed showing up in our flour. So that's really important. We can also do RNA interference. RNA is the molecule that brings information from the plant DNA out into the plant cells and even outside the cell so it can be expressed. If we interfere with that mechanism, we can stop the gene from being expressed. I think it's very cool. Opportunities with gene editing, improved cannabinoid production, improved food quality. We can knock out the THC genes, and this can better protect our farmers. A lot of people may not want to grow hemp because of the risk that it will go hot and produce THC and be confiscated. If we can just knock that out entirely, that would be better. We can overproduce trichome genes, overproduce the trichomes, which means more medicine per flower, upregulating fibers for better fiber strength and production. Disease and pest resistance are probably going to be the most important. You can breed a resistant plant much, much faster than in traditional breeding. And like I said, anything you can think of, oil quantity, oil quality, seed size, the flavor of the leaf, terpene manipulation, even shelf life of the food. If we can look through the pangenome and figure out what unique motifs are in the genome, we can look for that. We can pretty much do anything that exists within the plant already. And we're using AI to identify target genes. So now I no longer have to hand comb through the pangenome. I can like sick the AI on it and the AI can tell me what's going on, which is cool and also kind of scary. Some challenges. Public versus private funding. This goes to who gets to use what technology. And as we were saying before, private entities are usually going to be more well funded and they're usually going to be working on their own money-making agenda, not necessarily what's good for humanity or for the community that they're whose space that they're moving in. So this is also going back to companies patenting and then sitting on those patents so that no one else can touch them. Public acceptance is also a big issue with legality, morality, how people are voting based on their ideas of cannabis is going to be affecting the funding towards research. And this has cascading effects towards, development of medicine coming out of these plants. And also cultural acceptance. Many indigenous groups and groups who traditionally use cannabis medicine don't want GMOs. Perfectly valid. We can't change the culture, but I think it's important to work together with the groups and take the concerns seriously in order to find a solution that's going to satisfy all the parties. This is going to take hard conversations. This is going to take research. This is going to take a lot of money to fuel the people having the hard conversations and research, and a lot of time to build trust. Thank you so much for listening to me. My email is here in case you'd like to continue asking questions after, but I can definitely take questions now. Jim and I will be happy to answer anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuesday. That was incredible. We do have questions. Sam, do you want to? I'm just going to go down the list, and you're the first person in my. Do you want to ask your question? All right, I can ask for Sam. If an existing cultivar is made into a triploid from a haploid, can it be patented as distinct?
That's a great question. Good trick question. That's why Jim is laughing.
Yep.
So, yes, that was one thing I wanted to pursue within my PhD studies. But unfortunately, no. Ploidy, haploidy, mixoploidy, anything that has to do with the number of chromosomes is not going to be considered distinct in the eyes of the law.
I might have a little bit different take on that.
Oh, good. We have hope.
Just if you use a plant patent, you might be able to get it because it would be a derivative, and if you could demonstrate that it is different from the original material, you might be able to get it with a plant patent. I don't think you could do it through a PVP and I don't know about utility patent, but anyway, that's my take.
Great.
Chandra, you had a question. Do you want me to go back to it?
My question is my question's a little bit broader than what I thought it was at first. My question is, does the USPDV already contain a patent for cannabis, and could the already underlying structures that exist for this plant harm us as we move forward? Because I know that a lot of the laws that existed up into the 1930s were slowly being changed to make cannabis an illegal plant before Sinclair made cannabis illegal. And does this fall into that body of law that is going to get in our way moving forward?
I I So I think, let me see if I can sum this up, Chandra, and tell me if I'm wrong. Will the governing body, the UPDV, should we be looking to those regulations, right, as we move forward for federal? Is that who's going to be regulating this plant in this conversation?
Yeah, because the UPDV existed before 1930, and a lot of government offices that controlled plants and agriculture at the time were slowly poisoned even before we became illegal, and that before cannabis itself became illegal. And I'm wondering if uh, I don't know a lot about this body of law, but I'm wondering if this is part of that body of law too.
So I'm not familiar with UPVD, and what that is. That more around the drug or medicinal use of plants and that sort of thing? It could be.
I think a lot of the stuff that I slightly kind of remember being told about it was a long conversation about a while ago, but it being told about this is that it mainly fell under getting cannabis away from the formulary and how it was pulled out of the formulary and how cannabis itself was pulled out of the medicinal formulary.
Hmm. I would probably say that this landscape is definitely changing. I mean, it's been changing. It's just, part of the reason why we don't have a lot of trust in the federal government when moving in these, you know, cannabis advocacy spaces. That is why I might suggest pursuing a trademark or the geographical indication over um, plant patenting with government power backing it, because the trademark is always going to be yours. And we don't know what would happen legally if these patents are someday going to be, scratched off of the government website. We've seen that happen with DE&I stuff. So it's important to keep the power in your own hands.
Thank you, Patty.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Mhm.
and you guys, when you get up and answer a question, we have some new folks on the call. Just kind of introduce yourself really quick if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, yeah, I'm Patty in San Diego, and I am a psychopharmacologist. My question is about specific single molecules, cannabinoids specifically, as well as possibly terpenes. Are they being patented to your knowledge? And my concern is with companies like GW Pharmaceutical and even the US government that, according to my research, holds patents on specific cannabinoids, and that would limit or cause a huge expense to other people who formulate medicines to be able to use those cannabinoids in their formulation. So do you guys have any information about that?
I'm not aware of any single molecule that's been patented. I know there's a lot of utility patents protecting chemical pathways to reach those molecules. So I think there's going to be more difficulty in if a entity has the most efficient and cost-effective way to produce a molecule and they are not sharing that information with you. If you can find a way to circumvent and produce that molecule a different way, I think you will be okay. But again, I'm not an expert in the law.
Yeah, I would just add to that in general, you can't patent naturally occurring substances or chemicals. Now, if you modify them, and
Hmm.
this is true for DNA in particular, like genes, if there was a while when people were patenting all sorts of random DNA sequences, but then the the USPTO stepped in and said, these have to be modified in some way by humans. So I think that's a distinction you have to keep in mind with these.
Thank you. That's very helpful. That's an important distinction. Do we have any more questions in the group or comments? I have some questions that were sent to me and then I took a few notes, but does anyone else have? Josh, you look like you're trying to say something. Josh?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I had to unmute it there. Yeah, actually, well, I'm just curious about. First of all, it's a joy and a pleasure to hear both you, Jim, and Tuesday talk about all this stuff, and also uh, being here. I was born and raised in Oregon. Actually, we have a licensed cannabis farms not far from you, probably 20, 30 minutes from OSU, and I've been doing breeding, and I grew up on a family farm out in Pleasant Hill that we had heirloom vegetables and stuff. Mom always had a victory garden. That's how she fed us. I moved to Humboldt at a young age, started collecting cultivars, and brought them up to Oregon to care for my elders at the time, and began a breeding program because I was not so close to my neighbors like I was in Humboldt and stuff. But the thing is, about the herbarium you talked about, is there actual people preserving this in some official aspect? I mean, I have an herbarium. That's what I call it. My wife calls it just the office with all the weed in it. But it's it's cultivars from back in Humboldt time, and ones given to me, not just the seeds, but also the plant material. I guess one thing I want to know, maybe just a little bit. I've Googled herbarium before, and it seemed like it'd be sketchy to give someone something, without knowing more about it. But one thing Layla and I talked about a lot is this dry material useful sometime now or in the future for all this testing and processes you guys are figuring out? Like, is the DNA, we thought it wasn't really viable, but is there a usefulness for these old branches of good weed and things like that, things pressed into books?
Probably. There people have worked with ancient DNA, taken herbarium specimens that are several hundred years old and been able to isolate DNA in other plant species. And
Now,
go ahead.
would it just be for research though, or would it be useful, viable for any kind of development of cultivars? I don't know if I'm even asking the question right, but
Mike might have some 2 cents on this. Mike, are you trying to put in some 2 cents?
Yeah, we've done sequencing from like dispensary samples where they've dried flower, and it's come out fine. There is the potential for DNA degradation. One of the biggest issues could be that if it's not really preserved well, then it rots during preservation, and you get a lot of additional microbial DNA in addition to the ones that are normally there. One of the biggest things that happens is you get a lot more fragmentation. So you get, shorter DNA pieces, which may not be a problem. If you've got a good amount of DNA to work with, it could be fine. It depends how much it's degraded. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot, but you can definitely sequence from DNA. In fact, early in my career worked with the folks that sequenced DNA from Neanderthals that was 40,000 years old, and that was very short DNA and quite degraded, but got a lot of good information out of it.
Sam, did you have something? Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Sam, did you have something to add?
Yeah, sorry, do I just speak?
Yeah, go right ahead. I could tell that you were trying.
Oh yeah. So my question was if there's an existing cultivar that's obviously like a heirloom or already out in the world, and then an individual takes that cultivar, selfs it, and then only breeds within the progeny of that one cultivar, not adding any new genetic material, at what level is it distinct enough for a plant patent, I suppose?
I would say if you can demonstrate a significant difference between it and, say, the parent or some other standard, then you would be able to get a PVP or a patent on that.
Okay,
That's
very cool. Thank you. Thank you,
no,
Dr.
that's a
Myers.
critical thing.
So I want to jump in around this herbarium conversation and what Josh was bringing up and what Tuesday brought up earlier around phylos. One of the inspirations around this project was building a bridge between you guys keeping it in your seed collections, whether it's a storage unit, I mean, everybody has a different way of doing it, and getting it to like medicinal genomics or a lab so you could start getting validation around what you were doing. Like, how do we protect that so we don't end up in another phylos gate or whatever you want to call it? And as I was diving on this adventure, that's how I ran into Jeff Hamilton, and he came to me with the concept of Canopy Right, which was building a unique blockchain system that allowed the breeders, that allowed the creators to keep the plant material in their freezer. So you weren't sending plant material, you weren't giving plant material, because we already understood what Mike was saying is that, look, we're getting DNA from thousands and thousands of years ago, and science could very well advance to that point around this plant. So how do we get all these folks that have so much talent and so many medicines to protect them so they have the control over that? And so I don't want to go into what all about Canopy right now, because that's just a whole nother conversation. But if anybody wants to know more about it, the security system is patented, and we did this because it means that even though I'm an administrator, Jeff's an administrator of it, if you say, oh yeah, we don't want you accessing our data anymore because we believe your data is going to be maybe more valuable than your plant, I think there's going to be a good balance in that at some point in this marketplace, because the market needs your data so bad. We wanted to make it so you could shut the world out and protect your data and reverse the blockchain system. And then you can engage in cow poly and herbariums and whatever you want to do in a way that created this timestamp, like what Tuesday was describing in an email is, and created the prior art for you, is what we like to call it. So there is a mechanism. It's free. The only part of it that's not developed is the licensing agreement aspect of it. Jeff put in so that you could literally do licensing agreements like Rocket Law, but we ran out of funding. But it still works as this place to protect yourself in a very basic way that allows you to put things that you really care about and start working with them a little bit safer. So there's some level of accountability. So if you have any questions about that, and we don't call it an herbarium, Joshua, because we didn't want to compete with other folks that are out there calling themselves an herbarium, and we didn't want to confuse that. But really, that's what it is a digital herbarium where you keep the herb on your own person. We don't touch it for you. Okay, so I have a couple questions from some folks that emailed me that I'd like to ask, that maybe you guys could ask really quickly. We got a few more minutes. At what scale does growing from seed become more financially viable than production from cutting propagation?
That's a question I can't answer.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I've considered that as well. Part of my research, I figure cutting the cannabis clippings and then getting them rooted and all of that takes a lot of time and effort. And of course, you're like, either you are doing it or you're paying someone to do it. And one of the things that I've been wanting to create is artificial seed. So I definitely think planting cannabis from seed is going to be more economical, which is why I'm hoping I can produce this artificial seed, which would just be like a cannabis stem cell wrapped in a nutritive gel that you can just stick in the soil. And then that way, of course, seeded plants have the tap root, which is probably a little better for the health of the plant. This is my first season growing hemp, so I'm not 100% sure on that, but I have had that question before. And although I didn't answer it fully, hopefully that gave a little bit of an idea of what the future might hold.
All right. What size population would be suffice for making genetic selections in today's market, and why do you feel that way?
What do you think, Jim?
Well, okay, so if I'm trying to maintain an open pollinated population, so it's a population of individuals that are random mating with one another. That's what I mean when I say an open pollinated population. Generally, you want a minimum of 100 to be able to maintain, to prevent inbreeding, depression from happening, from losing minor alleles out of the population from generation to generation. That's one answer to the question. The other is if it depends on what you're breeding and how you're going about it, and whether I don't know whether with cannabis whether there's lots of selfing done to produce inbred lines and then say crossing to make hybrids or that sort of thing. If you're taking that approach to derive inbreds, I generally work with populations of 200 individuals or so in my vegetables. So I might use a method that's called, say, single seed descent, where I'd make a cross. I would grow the F1, let that self-pollinate, and then I would produce F2s and make my initial selections. Well, actually, just grow out a couple hundred F2s and then take a single seed from each one, propagate that for, say, 5 generations, 4 or 5 generations, till each of those individual lines is pretty much fixed and completely homozygous or nearly homozygous. And then select the best lines out of that population of 200. That's just one plant breeding approach for being able to do this. But yeah, I don't know enough about the genetics or how, what sort of cultivars people are producing with cannabis to really, I think, answer that carefully.
Thank you. Sam, did you have another question? All right. Mike, do you have another question? Information? No? Okay. I have a couple questions that just through the notes, and of course, if anyone has new questions, just jump in. One of the things that is you mentioned that is one of the driving concerns that I have is like people going out and making all these patents, and then the originator or the creator of them is legally shut out from their art. Does prior art protect that from getting patented? And my understanding is if you've publicly put it out into public domain, then someone like a big ag company can't patent it either. Is that correct?
Yes, my advice generally is to publish it and put it out there, because then that's prior art. It makes it difficult. I can give you an example of what happened with a tomato variety I developed. I developed the Indigo tomatoes, which have this purple color on the skin, and an Israeli company tried to come in and patent a variant on this material, and eventually the patent was abandoned or was denied because I had a graduate student who'd done the same sort of work, and we published that work. So it was out there in the prior art, and basically meant that patent couldn't be prosecuted.
And so did that prior art consist of really extensive documentation that made that tomato unique? Is that what was able to establish that?
It was a combination of a particular gene called high pigment with the genes that that produce the anthocyanin pigments, the purple in the fruit. And they were trying to patent the idea of combining that high pigment gene with these other anthocyanin genes. And we'd already done that work, published it. In terms of varieties, sometimes it's very difficult to anticipate what someone might patent. So you might, there might be prior art, or you might have something that precedes what someone's applying for a patent for, but if you didn't document it with enough detail or in a certain way, then they might still be able to patent the material, even though there is prior art. The thing to do, I think, in a situation like that is bring your prior art to the attention of the patent examiner through the third-party issuance if you're within that 6-month window, or to submitting it to the patent attorneys who are prosecuting the patent.
One other thing I would add to that is, regardless of what mechanism you end up using, the documentation really is important. And think of it as, sometimes they call it building a moat, but basically, any one piece of information isn't enough, right? So also, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not giving legal advice, but
We got a lawyer on the call. He'll tell you maybe.
I figure that's got to be said, right? But in general, I know I've talked with a lot of folks who've lost varieties that they've bred and developed because they couldn't, through acquisitions and other things, they had licensed it but didn't really document it well, and then it would be too much of a of a lift to go and try to litigate that, but if you have enough pieces of data that triangulate and show all the efforts that you've made in breeding those varieties, that you can point back to, that are varied, and and the more independent they can be as well, that those are great pieces of information to put together, so that especially, like, I think in cannabis, where we have a lot of stuff that's out there, right? And then people can, in some cases, claim it for their own, or try to retell the story of its origin, right? That's happened. So I think it really important to document as thoroughly and detailed as possible in ways that could be validated independently.
What can you define that a little bit more for folks, Mike?
Yeah, so it isn't just, something that you can say, I did that, but if I have information that I can show that, you had it in a licensing agreement before, you've got well kept notebooks with your breeding notes and that sort of information. I mean, I'm gonna say DNA sequencing is a helpful one there, but I have a vested interest in that part, so I'll put my conflict out there. But
Well, it's you have a proven test case too, though, the first in the really in the industry, like it worked.
Yeah, and now folks use that to prevent those problems, but it's I think even that, even just having the DNA sequencing cannot be enough if you don't have other well documented information about your origin, because anybody can go get a piece of plant material and sequence it. It doesn't mean you developed it.
Right. I think that's what scares a lot of the culture is that around these conversations is
Yeah. So even when I talk to people about what we do, I always say it's a piece of evidence that's, has a indelible, time stamped, uh, piece of evidence that you could use, but it's only useful if you have the supporting information to show how you got there.
all right, everyone. Well, I need to smoke. It's 4 o'clock. We have another 30 minutes and we haven't like kind of said hello to each other. I want to first thank Tuesday and Jim. If you want to hang out with us, we usually just keep talking. But we loosen it up a bit and kind of let everybody catch us up on things. You're welcome to stay and join in. If you can't hang out, go right ahead. I'm gonna light up my joint, and I'm really interested in hearing what everyone is going, what's going on, and updating. I'll give a quick update. I have been doing nothing this summer but smoking weed and growing my plants. I have a train wreck in my garden, which I'm so excited about. And the skunk one is doing amazing in my garden. It's very happy there. A big Kush, an XJ13, and a Laytonville skunk, and just really that and focusing on the project. So I'm having a cruise summer. Patty, you want to catch us up what's going on in your world? You're the first person on my screen.
Yeah, hi everybody. Working with a multiple farm group in San Diego County. They're all from reservations here in the county, and we have partnered with a organically certified farm called Coastal Roots Farm in Encinitas, and we are producing a youth program. It's a 4-year program for youth ages 17 to 18 to learn how to grow food and to teach food sovereignty. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah, so that's basically what I'm doing. Thanks.
Amazing. Tuesday, do you want to come in and talk about anything else going on in your world that you might want to share with the group?
Sure. This past week was my first time out to the hemp fields, OSU's hemp fields. We've got one in Southern Oregon, one in Klamath Falls, and one in Hermiston, Oregon. And plants are looking good. They've really grown a lot faster than we were anticipating. I'm not sure, is anyone else experiencing that in their fields? Yeah, but it's going well. We're going again tomorrow because it's getting time for us to start taking our notes and make selections for next year. It's very busy.
Yeah, I feel like we had this like false spring over here in the Pacific Northwest,
Mm.
and then this early summer, and then the snow, which gave a lot of water.
Oh, wow.
I feel like I have an orchard and all sorts of stuff, and I feel like everything is early.
Early. Okay.
It, that's just, I don't know the science behind it, but it
Yeah,
does feel that way.
that's interesting.
It is,
Yeah.
it's a very responsive crop, and
Mhm.
which means it's unpredictable.
Mhm.
Sean, what's going on in your world, my friend?
What's up, Lele? I'm checking on some seeds actually right now that I'm trying to germinate that I got from somebody that actually I met, who's part of our meetings, Mike Robinson, and he
Yes.
kicked me down some CBG genetics. So I'm trying to pop them. Not seeing a bunch of tails right now, so I was just kind of checking. Some of them are actually CRISPR genetics, and
Oh,
uh, yeah, so that's a first new thing, but a lot's been going on. I'm actually an engineer for Caltrans now, so I've been doing that, and the farm's at full tilt, and I'm running what I used to run with 5 people with one, and things are looking great, but I'm losing my main employee right now, so I'm literally replacing him with 2 other people in the middle of the season, which is not ideal, but I'm sure we're gonna pull it off because I just don't stop and won't stop until we do. Um, Long term, I'm trying to figure out a way to continue doing things and leveraging kind of the genetic side and the medicinal side really, and continuing to work on the medicines because I'm having great success with my daughter still, and also the four other people that I'm supplying medicine to, also having really good results. So I want to really follow that through, and I've got ACDC and doctor's orders and OG ground, which is what I make my three whole medicines with. So ensuring myself a source of that. And then
Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, no. You can ask a
Are
question.
you getting data back from those patients?
A little bit. I honestly don't have a ton of bandwidth, so I'm just checking in with them here and there. Um,
Ask Dan. So Daniel has the survey that we used for the skunk one.
uh-huh.
He really helped put that together, and now he has a much more extensive survey. His survey, and I would be more than happy to help do this, would be really easy to adapt for a medical survey. And
Yeah,
then it just gives you then it's like you're not doing much work, and it gives the folks an easy way to give you feedback.
that would be great. I'm
'Cause you
definitely
are
interested in that.
you're doing really focused work, Sean, and you want to be able to get value from that long game and get the credit for it. Not mean like, oh, you get the credit, but like this is medicine and this is how it's working.
Yeah, ultimately, I really need, doctors that are already practicing in this field and willing to do some trials and also, prove the bioavailability increases that I'm getting with my recipe, because it's not just straight oil, and that's a huge difference with my stuff versus others. One, it's where it's from, how it's grown, what it is, but two, it's how it's blended to be bioavailable and useful for your body. So I really want to prove that. And you need blood panels to show, okay, here's the oil, 100% oil. Here's Sean's oil, you know.
John, I could
And
probably
seeing,
help you with that if you
okay,
if you want to talk offline.
yeah, I'd love to, Patty.
Okay.
Yay. See, there
Um,
you go.
cool. And then, yeah, other than that, I'm also like toying with this idea of starting a new entity, like a 508c1a, like that religious entity, because I'm just getting drowned out by taxes. And I'm like, how can I get out of this trap? And seeing that, and maybe founding something like that that's mission is spreading, plant medicine to the world, that's, naturally based, God's gift to humans, and people seeking alternatives. And then having, a nonprofit coupled with that donates medicine, but also a for-profit LLC that, does sales, that's owned by that entity. So I'm trying to figure that whole thing out as well. Maybe be able to do some of this stuff that's non-Delta 9 with like a website and that type of organization.
We have a
Sean,
proven
we can talk about that one day if you want.
Okay, Jeff. Cool.
Just reach
Yeah.
out to me. You know how to reach me.
Oh, yeah, I do for sure. Thank you, guys.
blessings. Chandra, do you want to give us an update? What's going on in your hood?
I've been going to a lot of protests. Today, my friends from Be Vocal, I didn't get to go because I was on the phone call, but everybody else I know went to a great big ice protest up at City Hall in Cambridge, and we've been growing enough, and it's been a phenomenal summer of just protesting the stupidity of what is, and seeing our movement growing in numbers.
Thank you. I'm isolated. I'm not able to get out there, but I sure appreciate all the work happening out there. I think a lot of us do. Mike, you want to give everyone a little update on what we keep kind of alluding to? Are you just, I think that's really fascinating for the group.
In what respect?
The settlement.
Oh yeah. So I've been working with a breeder in California who was a breeder for he licensed his varieties to a cultivator and was also brought on as their head of cultivation. That seemed to be going well for a year or so, and then he found himself locked out of the building, and they said, "Thank you very much. We don't need you anymore." And however, they kept growing and selling his varieties, and so wasn't very happy about that, and of course violated the license that he had licensing that he had agreed to with them. So we ended up sequencing samples from dispensary as well as examples that he had continued to grow, and did a comparison. Ended up with over $500,000 settlement from his ex partners, and company actually went out of business because of it. But now we do all of his sequencing on everything he develops before he licenses it, and he puts that into his licensing contracts that to kind of put him on notice that I've got it sequenced, so I know how to detect it, even if you change the name, and continue to sell it under a different brand. So just don't do that, and do business above board.
I think it also shows one of the things that I think it was Jeff that taught me this, that I mentioned earlier, that if we create a solid line of accountability, then we're preventing the theft more. And so when you go into a contract with that kind of accountability and like this is protected, then you're already kind of saying you're setting the table for them to respect that, whether you want to call it fear or intimidation, whatever, but you're like saying, no, I got my stuff taken care of. So, and what I've seen is it also adds more value to the contract. Because you're automatically saying this is special, so I've taken really good care to protect it. I'm excited about that case. I think it's a game changer for this conversation, and it's going to put, I hope it gets more public because it'll put other companies on watch, and it'll make these types of conversations stronger for the breeder.
Yeah, I think so. I think it helps.
Yeah. Any information you can send, because we want to incorporate it into the white paper. And also when we get to the genomics aspect of it, I'm hoping we'll get a lot of your support in that part of it, because the genomics conversation and the blockchain conversation right now, I think are really relevant. One, because of the whole data theft thing and everything in the way Canopy Right is designed, and two, because of your case. And then so many people are feeling the burn. I guess the burn from the burner. I didn't mean that at all, but you know what I'm saying. So yes, I think those are going to be heavy pieces of the white paper.
Yeah. So I'm happy to help you with that part, and let me know how I can pitch into that.
Yes. Well, first I've got to come up with the funding to get Mitchell going, which I'm doing. It's coming in slowly. Josh, do you want to say hi and who you are and everything to the group, and anything you got to update us in Oregon?
Yeah. Things are going nice. It's a beautiful season. It's been a little bit of a drought, but we got plenty of water at the farm. I'm sitting here with some of the conscious crew now, Angela and some of the people that help us do some stuff that help us do the selections and whatnot. We're actually going out here in a few this evening to do some selections of the the final cuts, making it into the field to, for the future breeding, and have a couple depths I dedicated to just really not pheno hunting, already pheno hunted out strains, doing tests on them as a depth strain. So I got a lot of mixed areas just to, get that research and data. And, I was going to say, I heard that about the hemp fields that OSU has. It'd be awesome if they had a Southern Willamette Valley hemp field. We have prime hemp land. We've had a hemp permit there for a few years. We didn't grow it this year, just concentrate on the recreational spot. But our spot's, close and open for, if OSU ever wants to expand and have something close to campus to work with. But right now we got a lot of our albinos trying out in different settings and different stress tests. I think you've seen the albino before.
What do those profiles look like on those albinos? What kind of medicine are they producing?
From it's real lightheaded high. We're not getting much research on the finished flower because, as you know, I never grew much of it in the past. I didn't think it was viable for production, and then find out different ways. But we'll have to test out more this year. But it's very joy inducing. People laugh a lot on it, so it's really I don't know what that's like, but people will be like, oh, what's going on? I'm real extra giggly, and we all get lifted from herb, but this one is definitely more of a sativa kind of, what someone would call a sativa high. But yeah, I need research on that. Anyone here in the group's welcome to try some samples of it. It's not the prettiest when it's finished dried, but there is, actually, here's the background of it right there. I had saved, but it's really good and pretty in the vegetative state there. And anyways, crossed it with the pink. Just learning more about that. I don't want to waste too much time getting into that right now, but I just invite anyone else to collaborate and try things that we're doing out for their own medicinal needs or any other research.
Dan,
I appreciate everything.
Dan was on the call earlier, but you and him should connect. He's really into collaboration. And he's got a lot of good work in the market too. And I was just talking to him earlier about collabs. So I'll connect you two.
I appreciate that.
You guys might even
know
somewhat
each
overwhelmed. Other. Yeah. It might be like the last hookup. Oh, dude, you might already know each other. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you very much.
I would like to try the albino. The giggleweed. That's very interesting. Where is it? I don't know. I had some cantaloupe haze about 5 years ago, and it was a giggleweed. But it seems like a lost art right now, the giggleweed. Maybe it's because we're so as a society. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. The trends of the breeding and the production values. It's like I said, it's not much of a producer strain. So when you, a lot of those cultivars fell off over the last 10, 15 years with, hey, we're going for production. What sells good? What has the highest THC? This, doesn't fit those categories, but it's something great. A lot of sativas, we see other people working with sativas occasionally, but they don't really put it into production. So it's another thing I'm developing. Actually, that orange that you really like, the orange blossom, I got that in heavy production. Thinking of you actually, and how much you enjoy smoking that with me. So yeah bless you.
Bob, do you want to say hello and let us know what's going on in your world real briefly? We can come back to you if you change your mind. Jeff, you want to say hi? I want to know what's going on in your world.
I mean, I'm not giggling enough.
I know. You've been gone too long.
I'm in my office. Yeah, not much. Just going through summer. The kids are going back to school in a couple weeks. But yeah, happy to sample any giggle weed if you have extras. Good to see you, Josh. I've missed your face.
Good to
Um,
see you, Jeff.
sorry.
Etienne, you want to say hi and give the group an update what's happening with you guys?
Happily. Sorry, my dad just got done, so I'm going to do this real quick. Let's see. A lot going on. We just had, of course, we lost Wade Laughter, so we just had his celebration of life in Nevada County. I led a nice discussion on his life by friends of his over the years. Let's see. Berkeley Patients Group is about to turn 26 years old.
Wow, congratulations.
Let's see. Our Veterans Group, Veterans Action Council, has been meeting regularly with the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, and we're working on an educational initiative to educate them about the veterans that have been leading the movement over the decades. So we're in the midst of putting that compilation together. And we're working with them on going after the cannabis use disorder, which is a major misdiagnosis happening to anybody who uses cannabis in the VA. And then we're also working with them on access to a traumatic brain injury nasal spray that has been put out by Germany, the Czech Republic, and Israel. That stops TBIs in their tracks. It's a mucosanol spray. It's THC dominant. To literally, if you hit somebody with a TBI within that golden hour, it stops the TBI in its tracks. So, considering that TBIs follow veterans to their grave and they're very expensive to treat and deal with, this is a move in the direction, as well as we're working on other traumatic brain injury studies, etc. We've been doing FOIA information requests with the United States government over access to medical cannabis information, and we've uncovered all kinds of stuff that we're going to be writing a series of articles about to make the media aware and the public aware. And then tomorrow I'm going to go to the California State Fair and check out since I'm an ambassador for the State Fair, I'm going to go check out the exhibit and see what that's all about, because last weekend I was moderating Wade's memorial, so I wasn't able to get there for the award ceremony. So I'm just going to kind of check and see what's going on with California cannabis at the State Fair. So thank you very much, Leilani. Great job. Great information. Always fun to hear you here.
Thank you. You know, I never met Wade in person, but he came to these calls, and because he heard me on another call of the International Cannabis, shoot, I can't remember the acronyms, but it was Kristen's group. And he really was like, you know, I tell people in the woo-woo world that like the plant is kind of like an angel. She's delivering Earth's universal love's messages through us, right? And some of us just really are like the sisters or the brothers of those angels. And Wade was definitely one of those plant angels. He was just such a sweet, kind man. He really was.
Etienne, I'd like to connect. We're actually putting together a whole veterans program at next year's CanMed conference. So I'd like to chat with you about that and connect you up with Dan.
Yeah, please reach out to us at veteransactioncouncil@gmail.com. That's our main access point, and we'd be more than happy to connect.
Awesome.
Mitchell, do you want to share a little bit about what your, expertise around this conversation and what you've been up to and what you think about putting this white paper together for us?
Yeah, sure. Guess I'll just stay off camera. I don't really have a nice background or anything going on, but hey, definitely seeing some familiar faces here. Jeff, it's been far too long since the EDA calls. Etienne, always nice to see you.
Always a pleasure.
One of these. Yeah, always a pleasure. And definitely would love to connect about some of the vet stuff you're working on. You know, me and Jane are big supporters of that. But when it comes to the white paper, yeah, really excited to get this project going off the ground. Was exciting to hear Tuesday talk about the pangenome earlier. I've been following that, been following a lot of these developments in cannabis breeding and genetics for a while now. So yeah, really excited about this project. Happy to get it off the ground. For anyone who doesn't know my background, cannabis journalist, written over 200 articles for over a dozen outlets, done a white paper on sustainability with the National Cannabis Industry Association, and that's just broad industry-wide sustainability. Done an additional white paper specifically focused on vaporizer sustainability issues with the Blink Group. Last year, the ASTM International published my first of its kind study looking at cannabis packaging waste in California. And I think we all probably know that there's a big issue with cannabis packaging waste. And as someone who has studied it for years, I knew it'd be bad. I had no idea how bad it was going to be. Just to put it in perspective, cannabis waste in California is on par with pharmaceutical waste, at least like household pharmaceutical waste, not the entire industry. But that's bigger than recycled oil. It's bigger than recycled paint. It's bigger than all batteries. It is a pretty substantial waste stream that right now we're not really doing much to deal with. So yeah, that's kind of my big passion: cannabis waste, cannabis sustainability. But I've done a lot of writing on all kinds of different issues and really excited to be involved with this project.
Thanks, Mitchell. So for those of you still on the call, we're putting together a cannabis ethics survey because what Daniel and Caleb Chen pointed out to me is that really that's kind of what we're talking about when we're trying to create accountability around genetics and structure something that has accountability and transparency. And so I have an outline, and if anybody wants to look at the survey, participate in putting some questions together. We want to keep those questions kind of open-ended because we really want the community to tell us what the ethics of this industry are. But we can steer those questions to make sure that we get answers about business ethics, farming ethics. It's really applied ethics, which kind of covers a whole bunch of things that we want to focus on. And I think all of you have a lot of valuable input around this conversation. What this also does, you guys, just to be really honest, for me, is talking about ethics is a much healthier conversation for me to have than talking about genetics. And what it does is it empowers the genetics, because that's what we've done, is we've created a system that empowers the creators, and that's what, in the culture. But it makes it a less combative. The genetic conversation has just gotten so, and people are really hanging on to it, that it kind of it gives us a softer way to share this information, which I think in these times will allow it to be received much more. And so how I see the structure of the white paper going is that we open it up and we focus on how we did this, which teaches the values of love and grace and community building and all those cultural ways. Then we dive into what the plant is telling us and what we've learned. And then we close it with, this is how this represents the bigger ethics conversation, to kind of stimulate that conversation throughout the industry.